Hi, this is going to be a short description of my most recent C# and .NET project. This one was to scrape news websites and also their Twitter accounts to see how they covered the coronavirus pandemic and create a database of all the articles or tweets for later analysis. Let's run briefly through the code and classes and say how it works. So this is the main, it's just a console app. So as we can see here in the main app, basically what it's going to do is it's going to read in some text files for tokens to access APIs or SQL connection string to write to the database. And then there's some other fields that are text files for so for example, I'm going to cover, like, these are some of the Canadian news outlets that I want to cover, and this is their Twitter handles. So I'll just go through those and that's how I'll access it. So if we run through the main program here, I can tell how it works is that basically I set up some shared classes here, mainly to access the SQL database. And here this is where I get access to Twitter users that I have listed in my text file. So it calls the Twitter API, gets the users, counts, and any information about those users. And then for each one of those users, the program will then go and call the Twitter API to get all of their tweets going back. You can get 3,200 tweets max, I think, from accounts. So I just kind of iterate through the API till I can max out the number of tweets that allows me to get for each of those media outlets. And then finally, I have the three, these are for scraping websites, which every website's different. So you kind of have to make a new class, even though there's some shared functionality. So I did like CNN, Fox News, and CBC News, the Canadian outlet here. So I'll run through those briefly, but then first I'll show like what you get. And basically what you get is in the end is a database. So this is the SQL Server database. So you can see you get this is the Twitter users. So you get the Canadian. This is a table with the Canadian Twitter accounts, media accounts. So CBC News, CTV News, Global Mail, etc. Here's American outlets. So CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. So this is going to get their Twitter accounts. Then this one here is all the tweets from all the different ones. So as you can see, it has each tweet has a unique identifier, an ID string, and I have the date it's created, then I have the full text of the tweet. And these are only tweets that mention like coronavirus or COVID-19 or the pandemic. So I filtered out from their accounts. And so as you can see here, I got quite a few, over 13,000 tweets here from various news outlets, American and US, about coronavirus. So I'm not going to analyze this data now, but this is just to capture it and maybe to analyze the tweets and see how they covered it and who covered the most or had the most things on certain topics or what kind of language they used. And finally, here would be the output of scraping websites. So here it would have the URL of the website, which outlet it was, so Fox News, CBC News, the headline, the date, and then full body text of the article. So this could be a good resource for lots of interesting information for how the language used to cover the pandemic and different things. And so as you can see here, I have about almost 6,000 full articles with full text, which is could be an interesting source of data to look at later. But anyway, back to the code. So basically, the main components you can see on the left here in the folders. I just have a configuration folder, which basically sets up my container for dependency injection. I have my data access folder, which is all my classes to access the SQL database. My interfaces folder, so it's all the interfaces for each class. Models, this is a data model that's going to be either an API model or for the putting in the database. And here's the main functionality, which is the scrapers, which are the actual programs that are doing the scraping either on Twitter or from the websites. So you can see in the container, basically what I do here is I just set up a container, AutoFact container in C#, and it just wires up all the classes and the dependencies, so you can inject the dependencies into each lower level class. That's pretty standard. So I'll get into like the Twitter scraper. So this is, for example, is Twitter scraper for the users. So what this does is in each list of all the Twitter accounts that I have in my text file that I want to cover, it's going to iterate through each one. It's going to call the API, get the data about that account, and then you can see here it's going to store in the database this the ID, screen name, description of, and how many followers there are for each one of those Twitter accounts. So that will create my tables that I saw earlier of the Twitter users, one for the US media and one for Canadian media. The next one after those were set up would be actually getting all the tweets regarding coronavirus. And you can see here that what I look for was each tweet I would do certain search terms. So I would look for coronavirus or COVID, social distancing, self-isolation, pandemic, those types of terms. So any of those terms appear in the tweet, then I save that one and I put it in the database. So basically what this one does is you have to kind of do I did a iteration here where it has to keep calling itself because it only lets you have 200 tweets per call, but you can get 3,200 max per account. So I would just keep going through, and then there's something you can get in each API returns is a max ID, and then that will tell you where you left off for that Twitter account before, what the tweets were. So we just kind of have to recursively call until you max out the account, and then so as I did that recursive, then I would store the data, which would be the ID string of the tweet, each unique ID, the date, the text, the retweet count, favorite count, and screen name of that particular Twitter user. So, and then this is the actual HTTP client that calls the API for both of those, for either you're trying to find information about Twitter users or information about the actual tweets. So this is the HTTP client, which you just go to the Twitter API account, and this is how you build my query for the API, make the request, and this first put it in a list, and then eventually put it into the database. So that's kind of how I get the information from Twitter for news accounts. So for websites, it's a bit more involved because each website is set up differently. So for example, for CNN, so when you scrape websites, you have to get like a WebDriver, use Selenium, and then you can open up browser and control it via your code. So for CNN, for example, CNN was actually pretty interesting because I'll just pop over to their site here. So if you search for CNN, you can see the search results here. So if you search for coronavirus, for example, and you scroll through, you can, in the Chrome tools, you can go down and find out what elements you want to find for your code to grab. But CNN actually puts the full body of every article in the search results. So you don't actually have to go into each link, which is really makes it very, very quick. Because some other websites, you don't get the full body. So if you want the full body text for the database, you actually have to open up every single URL with your code and scrape it each individual one. For CNN, it's actually really quick because you can just scrape it right from the search results themselves. So you can see over here on the right, this is the full text for a particular article here. So in the code, basically what you do is, I just went back like 100 search results because you can only get so many search results per page. It'll only show you so much. So basically you just use your Chrome driver. You put the URL in here so you can see the whatever page I want in the URL. You just keep incrementing the page number that you're looking at, page 1, page search results, page 2, page 3, page 4, whatever. And then once you go through the HTML, you can find like what you want to get from that website. So under one heading element, I want to get CNN search result, for example, and then I want to get down here, you can see like the headline, the publish date, and here's the full body, which I mentioned earlier is you can get the full body text in here. And so basically what I would do is I would go through the headlines. If headlines have any of the search terms for coronavirus or COVID or pandemic, then I would keep that one. I'd create my data that I want to store about this website for the database, put it in a list, and later that list would be written to the database. So if we looked at CBC, is a bit different is that same thing, you can do search for coronavirus. However, you can see the search results are over here, but you don't get the full text for, unfortunately, for CBC. So that means you actually have to go through every single URL and call it with your browser from your code and then scrape each website individually, as opposed to being able to scrape, say, 10 articles at once from the search results for CNN. So if I went to my CBC class scraper, it would be, I would first get all the URLs. And the URLs I can just get via a normal API call, and I would actually just get a JSON response as opposed to having to open up a browser and scrape the HTML. So I can get all my URLs first because I got to call each one individually, and then I actually go loop through all the URLs and start scraping them and look at the headlines, and does the headline contain the search terms that I'm looking for, coronavirus, COVID, etc. And then I got to go through and get the the full body text, the headline, the date, stuff like that, and then make a list of that data, and then eventually store that data in the database. So those are kind of the main scrapers, the functionality of how it's scraped. And then once I have the data, then you prepare to insert it into the database, which is fairly simple. So for example, this is the data for tweets. It would be you just insert it. You create an SQL string, and then you save that data to whatever table you want. So this is the Twitter user table, and this is the Twitter data table, and here are the fields I want to store for the users in the user table, and here's the tweets in the tweet table. And same thing for website. Websites would be, here's the data I want to store, and here's the SQL string. And then you have a shared SQL layer with the generic type, and it would just, whatever I pass it to it, it sets up a database connection. And with the data that's passed in from the previous classes for the tweets for Twitter or for websites, it would either load the data or just mostly save the data. So it would just set up a connection and then save the data to the database. And then if we went to the database, this is the end result, would be a database with all this information that I'm hoping to maybe have another project which is going to go into this and do some kind of analysis and maybe make some graphs and stuff to display to give some indication of how these different media outlets covered the coronavirus. So that is basically it. Thanks.